So, welcome once again, folks. And today we have a guest that I personally know, Mr. Maurice Regalado. Maurice Regalado is a lifelong educator who has been serving students in economically disadvantaged communities in the Los Angeles region since 1988. He began his career in education as a teacher's assistant, taught for 17 years and has spent the last 10 years working in school administration, additionally serving as adjunct professor at California State University, Dominguez Hills. He has been recognized by KTLA as the Latino Teacher of the Month for his inspirational work with impoverished youth, was named Mexican American Teacher of the Year by the Association of Mexican American Educators for his contributions to urban education, received Principal of the Year by Youth Policy Institute, and has received numerous recognitions for his work in education by both city and state elected officials. He considers his work in education his greatest opportunity to positively impact social issues and believes we need to consider the role education plays as it pertains to graduating students who know their worth, responsibility to the greater community, and are in possession of the intellect and skills necessary to implement change and lead their greatest life. Maurice, thank you for being here today and welcome.
Hey, thank you, Eldra. I've been looking forward to this. One reason because I love chatting with you, and two, that I'm hoping that somebody is in need to hear what we're going to be talking about today.
Okay, well, I hope so as well. That's always the hope. And I read a bio on you for the folks, but why don't you share a bit of who you are with us? You know, where do you come from? You know, let us get into your roots. Let us get to know you.
Got you. Well, I appreciate that opportunity. And, it's interesting you ask about the roots because, my journey in education started long before I became an educator or even thought about going to school to start working with students. My journey in education and the work that I'm trying to accomplish began, from a very early point in my life where I started to realize that things in my life weren't healthy for me. And I wasn't able to discern all the different details that I had in my life that caused me to make the decisions I made. I just knew it didn't feel good. Like it didn't feel good to see my mom, my stepdad, go at it physically. Didn't feel good to hear them, argue and drink and do all the different things that they would do. And so I wasn't able to name it as a youth. I just knew I wanted to get away from it as a youth. And so as years progressed, and I remember you just had, is it Fritzy on your show a little while ago, and, step inside the circle. And I just started doing some reflection in that, almost every one of those aces I experienced as a youth growing up. And so here I am as a kid trying to navigate these waters that, kids aren't supposed to have to go through, but yet so many are, and see if we can make sense of this narrative of life that we've been given. And so, of course, you start looking around, start looking for other people who also don't want to get away from their homes. And now you're accepted by a group of people that do accept you. And, going back to that deep sense of need for all of us to want to be loved and belong, you find a group of boys or girls that will accept you, and there's nothing you won't do to stay inside that circle. And so we started getting into trouble. As time went on, the more trouble I got into, the more I started to look at myself like I was a piece of shit. Because again, I couldn't understand that the impetus and all those things in my environment were leading me to a certain lifestyle that I wasn't born to live. There was nothing wrong with my wiring as a human being. I was just trying to respond to things I didn't know how to respond to. So then you fast forward, I went to 17 different schools, going back and forth between my mom and my dad. That in itself had its challenges, but again, I think it was, I know both my parents loved me, but they're incapable of showing me the love that they had for me because of the things that they were going through at that time. And so again, I found it somewhere else. And so this is obviously a longer story, but I'll fast forward a little bit. I spent my 17th and 18th birthday locked up at Sylmar Juvenile Hall, spent some time in, downtown Los Angeles, um, and Camp Mariloma in Lancaster. And I was at a point where I just given up that I had anything good to offer this world. And I would seek out any ways I could to alleviate that internal pain that I was going through. And I was 18 years old, and I was in a class in school at Camp Mariloma in Lancaster. And the teacher looked at me, and we had talked a little bit, and he said, you're better than this. You're worth so much more than you're showing yourself or showing this world. And he said, I'm going to help you find it. He said, I'm going to give you this book, and you're going to study it. You're going to take this test, and it's going to be equivalent to you passing the high school, getting a high school diploma. Now, Eldra, I'll be straight out honest with you. I didn't know anything about the book. I didn't know anything about what a GED was at that time. I just knew that I would run through walls for this man because he was the first person in as many years as I could possibly remember that actually saw some value in me. And so I took that book and I studied it like it was gospel. And I passed that test. And I still have the certificate today showing not only that I passed it, but the dates that I passed it. I remember the ride there in handcuffs, in the barred van. I remember the ride back in handcuffs, but I remember starting to feel like, oh, maybe something's different than I had thought about up to this point, and maybe I could begin seeing myself differently. Now, I got out, and it was interesting. One of the last things one of the guards said to me, he said, you're why we do this work, because he knew I was getting out. He knew I'd passed that GED. And I'm not going to say when I left, incarceration that life was beautiful, because I still had a lot of hard lessons to learn, Eldra. Hard lessons, things I did to myself and things I did to others. But slowly but surely, I feel like that was truly, if there's like an origin story to my life, it was that moment where I began to reconsider, my worth and my place in this world. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes all the sense in the world to me. And I can definitely resonate with a lot of what you spoke about. And so many of our young people have that same story and same background or a similar background, and maybe they don't all wind up behind bars, but that feeling of not being good enough, or the feeling of being in an environment that is not supportive of them being the best them that they can be, is something that unfortunately so many of our young people suffer from at pandemic levels.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak a bit to that? Because when you and I met, it was under the auspices of you being in the education realm, and you were working with some young men who were considered throwaways. And you were a man that I recognized as somebody with a heart that was saying, hell no, I'm not throwing anybody away. So can you speak a little bit more to, the need for our young men to have somebody, especially an education system, that believes in them?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you read my bio, so people kind of know the bones, of what I was doing when I was doing it, and what I've been, um, how I've engaged in education. But the spirit behind it was, I was a TA, again, 2 years out of prison, out of juvenile hall and camp, and now I'm been tasked to work with kids. And the teacher would say something like, "Well, can you take him outside and see if you can do something with him?" And I don't know if he was being disrespectful or not, but it was disrespectful. And I'd go out there, and all of a sudden, I would see the light come on. And all of a sudden, it was like it was reciprocal, Ezra, because when I saw their light come on, all of a sudden I felt a little bit, inside of me starting to shake a little bit, right? And then my light started to feel like it was flickering in a way it hadn't before. And so from the very beginning, work in education, and as you stated, it's always been in disadvantaged communities with the kids that aren't supposed to make it. That's all I've worked with. And so at year after year, and I saw the same story happen over and over again. One thing I forgot to put in the bio is I also worked as an after school supervisor. Why that's critical for this conversation is because when you work after school, you see the parents who come pick up the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a little bit deeper insight into what that home life must be like. And so there was one student whose name I won't mention for confidentiality, but every time his mom would show up, she'd come in drunk, she'd be screaming his name, and he'd run to the bathroom crying out of embarrassment and fear. And so I was able to take all this additional information to help me kind of figure things out. And then when I was working with him in the classroom, I wasn't working with him as that kid who never got the work done. I was trying to work him as that kid who's afraid to go home. And it was, interestingly enough, I worked at the elementary, the middle and the high school level. And he and a cohort of boys and girls moved with me at the same place. So I had a chance to see that kid grow. You would not be surprised that by the time he got to the high school level, he didn't make it through the high school. And the conversations from the teachers were, this kid's lazy, he doesn't care, he always is disrespectful. And it's like, well, those are simply manifestations of a need beyond which you can possibly understand, or it appears as if you're even willing to try to understand. And so from there, it really cemented my understanding of my purpose that, okay, you don't think these guys can make it? Well, let's prove that they can. And so of the program you're talking about, and again, maybe another time we can talk about how we even hooked up. I see you on a TED talk, and 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, I'm sitting in your living room and we're talking about what we could do to make a difference in this life. I'll never forget that as long as I live, Eldra. But we created a Lion's Den program where I went to the principals and said, give me your 20 most challenged student. I didn't say worst students, because they're not the worst students and they're not the worst human beings. The most challenged is the one that are showing significant trauma, difficulties in behavior, grades, and everything else under the sun. And I'm going to ask for them, and we're going to do something special with them. And so essentially we did work as informed by you, Joe Sigurdson from Boys to Men Mentoring down in San Diego, Dr. Lionel Allen in Urban Prep out in Chicago, and the list goes on and on. It's like, all right, you all have shown significant success and commitment to work with those that society seems to have given up on. What's your sauce? And then all that conversation and all that input then turned into what ended up being a super successful program, where we would meet every other week doing some kind of workout. We'd meet in the mornings before school and make sure we had a workout together, not even talking about grades, not even talking about problems, just fellowship. You belong to us. And there's an understood message when you belong to something, that you have value. And so if I belong to this thing, and hey, I may have not been interested in working out before this, but this guy high fives me when I walk in, or he smiles at me and asks about my day. We had that. We also had the mentorship, where we had a chance to sit in circles and just kind of talk openly and vulnerably about what it is to be a man, what it is to be a child trying to figure out a man's world. And even though we didn't talk about things like grades and behavior, all those things, I have empirical data to prove that all of those things improved without us even talking on those points, because we were addressing the root issues of why the behavior was happening in the first place. And so when we talk about issues, and people talk about, this has been historically consistent for the past how many years? I mean, since I've been in education, 30 plus years, but if you go back to my youth, 50 years, right? As if it's unattainable that we can create some type of new opportunity or option for our youth who are struggling. And it's completely attainable. All we have to do is, again, to approach the root of the issues. And it's not rocket science. I'm so glad you made it today. You made my day by the very fact that you showed up, right? And it's also helping them to navigate all those things on the inside. Not because I have their answer. I don't have a single problem, a person's answer in this life. Not one, except for maybe my own, and I'm still working that out. But I will listen to you, and I will show you how I've dealt with my stuff, in hopes that you might be able to navigate some of that stuff internally and become that best version of yourself that we know you have the potential to be.
Yeah, yeah. I'm listening to you, and I feel like I'm in church, like when I was a young boy going to church with my grandmother. I'm talking about that church that used to last from 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. And I can feel it in my bones, in my soul. And a question that comes up for me is, why are there not more people like you in the school system, in the education system, taking care of our youngsters and having that attitude towards the young people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the answer is complex. One of the first things that comes to mind is, in order to dig in with the most needy, for some, we had to be the most needy and make it out. And as you know, not everybody makes it out. And so when you get to hear people's stories, and you're able to actually serve as an example of, your childhood does not define your future. There's a quote in the series called Yellowstone, where it says, you're one of the few people that outlived your childhood. And it really stuck with me, because a lot of people can't, because they haven't been given that process, that support, the platform, whatever, to work those things out. And so I think part of it is, in order to want to address the greatest need, you have to have had had needed that support at one point in your life and made it out. But that's not the only answer to that, because there's a lot of people who didn't have to delve into those dark waters and are still trying to do good work with kids. And it's happening individually. Like we can all remember that, one or two teachers that just made us feel better,
Mhm.
right? There's one or two teachers that I could give a damn about history, but I love this man, so I love history now, right? He just brought that out of me. But unfortunately, the Jaime Escalantes, the ones that were those rock star teachers we can remember, they don't exist at a level commensurate to the problem. And so I think that the issue, to now answer your question more directly, is that we don't have a systemic solution to a systemic problem. We're depending on individual relationships and those few people that can reach the kids, and they do. And mass respect for anybody that's changed the trajectory of somebody's life. But if we're going to be able to make a dent in something that has been as historically consistent as the sun coming up, well, then we're going to have to approach the situation differently than we have. And we're going to have to ensure that, okay, we know these kids are acting this way because of this. And therefore, our solution will be grounded in a solution directly designed to meet this need, not a well written out lesson plan. And no disrespect to robust instruction. You saw I was a teacher of the year. I get the necessity for teaching rigor in a rigorous environment. But for those kids we're talking about, they need more than just a well developed lesson.
Mhm.
They need somebody that's going to be able to come in their life in the same way that people who don't go to these dark waters, they have that in their life. We're just trying to replicate it because it's not living organically in their own home environment. So we got to then create something to make up for that, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah, it definitely makes sense. It definitely makes sense to me. So what and I hear you talk about, you use the word a couple of times, the system and systemic. So as an administrator, because you've served as an administrator, what, with full autonomous power, what would you do if you were in control of the system in order to make it more equitable?
So are we talking system on a school-wide level, a statewide, or a national level? Because the
Let's
answer is
say
similar, but
let's start at the school level.
at the school level, rarely do you have a school leader that has the ability to truly redefine what the direction, the vision, and the focus of the school is going to be, because the school leader is essentially anchored to whatever the expectations are for public education, period.
Okay.
Right. And so a school leader might say, I'm going to go all in on creating a community where we all feel valued, we belong to something greater than ourselves, and that our work has meaning. And we can make it live. But the reality of it is, there's a lot of other things that keep that from living at a level that, again, is going to be able to provide the support for students that they need, especially in urban education. And again, I am focusing on urban education. It's all I've ever known. But trust me when I say there's great need in our schools across the country. Somebody used to say in poorer neighborhood, there's a liquor store on every block. Well, others have said in richer neighborhoods, there's a liquor store in every living room. Like there is abundance of problems and people operating from a deficit perspective in terms of who they are as human beings that is far greater than just urban education. I'm just speaking to this specific area. Now, given that there are things keeping us from moving um, as aggressively as we'd like to, because there are a lot of expectations that are connected to funding and your job and all these other things. But I would say, all right, those things have already been in place. You show me one statistics in this country in the last 30 years that show that we're working in the right direction. You think about incarceration rates, you think about addiction rates, abuse rates, mental health rates, depression, poverty, homelessness, like the list goes on and on. Those are simply manifestations of people growing up not thinking like they're worth anything. And when you don't think like you're worth anything, as I shared earlier, you make decisions aligned to that mindset. And so, what I can do on a local level, number one, every kid in that school is going to know I know your name and I see you not as a student, but as a human being first, and we'll figure out the student stuff after. Number two, I think that every school leader's got to model that. because I grew up professionally when I was a teacher, and I heard more than one administrator say, and I'm not kidding, if we just got rid of the 5%, we would be a great school. And that just, obviously hurt me at the core of who I am as a human being, because A, where are they going to go? The numbers will show you where they go, right? And what's going to happen to us in terms of our country. And then B, well, then when you wrote that mission and vision statement about what the school's about, you didn't mean for everybody. You meant the ones who made it easy. You made it the ones who's, already come maybe naturally wired to be successful in school, or maybe they have that home life that's giving them that filling their tanks up, right? But not the ones who need you the most. And so I think that the school leader has got to be really intentional around actions, words, and making sure that every utterance and every interaction is supporting the fact that we're here for every student that walks in these doors, regardless of challenge. That at least is a step in the right direction, because now we're able to a degree, insulate the kids from what's happening on the outside. When they walk in our doors, we're surrounding them with that warmth, that love, that hope, and that value that you got this, in a way that in many cases isn't living again naturally in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And now I'm gonna want to skip the state level and go straight to the national level. But for our listeners who may not have caught what you said and may not know what that means, can you go into what you refer to when the administrators speak about that 5%? If we could just get rid of that 5%, we'd be a great school.
Yeah,
Because we're
great
talking
question.
about humans here. And I want our audience to really understand and feel what that 5% is making reference to.
Yeah. So to start off, I was the 5%. You were the 5%. It was anybody who was making decisions that were either hurting themselves or hurting others on a scale large enough to become a problem. In the movie Lean on Me, Morgan Freeman gets up on stage as the principal, and he says, calls them all up. They're all the thugs, the gangbangers and everything, gets them on stage. And then he has his school thugs escort him out of the building. That is, you watch that movie, you watch that scene, that's the 5%. And I would propose that every single one of those human beings still had the essence inside of them that every one of us have. We just have to be willing to be as relentless in our pursuit to find that as the environment is around them, as relentless as it is to extinguish that. And if the environment's got greater, let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? Grit or resilience in terms of, I'm going to take this person down, we got to be stronger than that. And so the kid that always got in trouble, the kid that always got in detention, the ones failing their classes. I remember when I first became an administrator, there was kids, we had a middle school that was 5, 6, 7, 8. There was kids in 5th grade that were in detention. The following year, they were still in detention. I could have written a letter to the high school principal before the kids even got there. I said, these are the kids that are going to be in your class, in your detention next year, because we were trying to resolve the manifestation again, as opposed to the root.
Yeah. The 5%, folks. When we hear these numbers and we hear these statistics, because numbers and statistics in a lot of different venues mean something, for tracking purposes. But I don't want to lose sight that when we're throwing these numbers around and when we're using these numbers, we're talking about humans.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about humans, and I want humans to get at least the same amount of consideration as we would give them if I was talking to somebody from the SPCA. So now let's take it to the national level. If you were in charge, where would education be and what would it look like on the national level? The directive coming down from up above.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I want to emphasize that my perspective is not unique. And there are people who are absolutely superheroes in this work who are far more intelligent than I am. But I think that we're trying to maintain a system that was created long before we seem to really care about including everybody. And so it's kind of just continuing on a trajectory that started long before we were even alive. Right. And so going to the director level from on a national platform is leaders establish the direction we're going to go. And so if it's important that And people have done good work around this, right? Obama had the Brothers Keeper, Bush had his No Child Left Behind, and all the different presidents come in, and like education is important, but I've been through how many presidents, and the neighborhoods are the same, and the kids keep ending up in the same place, right? And I think it's just because we're focusing our attention on in the wrong area. So if I want to provide change in a neighborhood, the first thing I need to do is I got to listen to a neighborhood. Like I can check my assumptions at the door if I want to be successful. And people bring up LA and New York and Chicago as areas of greatest need. And so I can sit in my platform way up there and make decisions, or I can have a conversation. Say, what do you need? Because you talk to people who have been in this for a long time. You have dedicated their lives to urban education and trying to move that needle just a simple degree. They'll tell you exactly what they need. It's not like it again. It's rocket science. We can hit a moving rock in the middle of space, from millions of miles away, but we can't have a conversation with local educators to ask them exactly what they need. It doesn't make sense. And people begin to wonder after a while. Well, it's not that we couldn't. It's just we're not. And so I would propose that any leader of this great country of ours just take the time to start listening and see if we might start directing some of our resources, our energy, and even our accountability. Like we need accountability for state test scores. Great, great. But what does that mean in terms of that kid who year after year is going to end up in the same place? So I think it's a change of direction, but I also think it's based on a conversation first, as opposed to somebody making a decision about something that they really know nothing about.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a hell of a plan and a hell of a recipe for leadership. And what I'm wondering as I hear that is there room and is there guidance or encouragement for teachers? And before I ask this question, let me say that teachers, in my humble opinion, have some of the hardest jobs in this country, in our society. They're charged with taking our children and pretty much raising them from kindergarten on throughout. And we rely on them, to educate our children and help us as parents prepare them for the world. And they're severely underpaid, again, in my humble opinion. And so I want to say that and lay that out there before I ask this. Is there encouragement anywhere along the system for teachers to engage on a level that includes empathy, that includes making a connection on a human compassionate level? And I'm assuming that most people who go into the field have that in them. That's why they're going into that field. But now what I'm asking about is encouragement from the system.
Yeah, the system, no. Leaders, yes. And so, I had to make a decision about how I felt I was going to make the biggest impact on this world while God still gives me breath. And I think that there's obviously one avenue is the policy level, where you're going to hopefully be able to make some changes there. But if I'm being perfectly frank with you, again, I don't have a lot of confidence in that. The other avenue is maybe more grassroots. Let's do something against the grain to show it can be done. And I have never met in 30 plus years in education a human being who got an education to ruin the human being's life. No teacher gets into this profession in order to hurt somebody. All of us got into it to make a difference. But I would also say that where you choose to teach has a big influence over your success and how you feel. Because I respect teachers everywhere, and you're right, they are underpaid, they are unappreciated. Many have chosen to take a stand against the ills of society that society can't fix yet, and yet still be held accountable. Like, it's crazy the paradigm that educators have to experience. But I think the only thing that I've ever seen work is when the people in the building, not on a political side, but just the people in the building, have decided that we're going to do something different. And it does come from the leader, because I cannot possibly ask my teachers to interact with students on a compassionate or empathetic level where you come seeking first to understand as opposed to seeking to judge. Um, if the leaders themselves aren't also living that. And so if we're going to create a paradigm where everybody's welcome and built up, well, it's not just for the kids, but because as human beings, just because we have degrees and we're older, it doesn't mean that we now no longer have those basic human needs of being loved, belonging, recognized, supported, and valued for what we bring to the table. And so any leader out there, I don't care, what field you may be in, but specifically around education, that's got to be a baseline that it's understood that that's the way we do things here. And I think therein lies an opportunity for it to actually live. Because if you think about it, every year, we have conversations at the beginning of the year about how we're going to, create a great school. And it's no disrespect to those conversations. A lot of work goes into this. And I have worked with absolute superheroes over the course of my career. But I would say this, that I have rarely seen a working environment that actually authentically lives the same type of culture that we hope that the teachers are bringing to the students, so that there is harmony, right?
Mhm.
There is a complete cohesiveness between what we say is important and what we're actually doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that note, what is your go-to self-care tool? What do you do to take care of Maurice in order to be in tip-top shape as you go into the world and serve others?
Mm. That's still an ongoing challenge. I won't say struggle, but it's an ongoing challenge for me. But I'm in a having done this for as long as I have, because my light's not going out, sir. Like my light will go out when God says your light's going out, but it won't go out before then. And it really has been around um, making sure I'm investing in Maurice. And I want to emphasize this because everybody talks about work-life balance, especially with educators. Everybody talks about make sure you're taking care of yourself. Personal wellness is super important. But I would say that it's said more than it's done. And so going back to that harmony thing that I was talking about earlier, if I'm not living it, then how can I possibly think that my teachers are going to be able to, if they're not already, right? And so to be specific on that is number one, and I can't remember who said it, but truest harmony and peace of mind comes when your actions are working in concert with your values. And so for that to happen, I was at a place where I had these values about what I said was important, either the way I interacted with others or I interacted with myself. But then I wasn't being intentional around how I created them in my life. And so, first thing in the morning, I'm on my knees. And everybody, you have your own relationship with God. Maybe you don't believe in God. Maybe you say, I don't know what it is, but I'll tell you this: for me, the absolute game changer in my life is I start my day with gratitude. I ask for strength. I ask to stay grounded in my work and the tumultuous nature of my work in such a way that will still allow me calm inside. And at the end of the day, I do a reflection to see if I actually lived up to it. And there's some days I do it great, and there's others I still need help. But it has definitely transformed my ability to make sure that I'm staying true to what is best for me.
Mhm.
Because I can't possibly create a school or run a school where I'm trying to get kids to live their best life possible if I'm sacrificing everything I am as a human being for that even to be possible. That's hypocritical at the very least, right? And so I've got to be able to show you can work your tail off, but still do so in a way that's, working in concert with your truth and also your own personal well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. Got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of yourself. What are can you give us three things over the arc of your life that stand out as your most proud moments?
Mm. One, I would say, you'd think it'd be the GED, but at that moment, I was just doing it because somebody told me it's a good idea, that I needed to do it, and so I did it for somebody else, to be honest with you. But once I got out, I had some issues with some addictions and some abuse and things, and I was able to pull myself yet out again from a very, very dark place. And I still remember the picture of me standing when I first got my bachelor's degree. and just reflecting on the journey it took for me to get there. So that would be number one. Um, Number two, I would say it wasn't necessarily a moment, but a period in my life where and to this day, feel like I am living in such a way that's going to be the best suited to support my sons as they grow up. And it's interesting because given that I didn't have that model, and by the way, my dad now is 30 plus years sober, and he is a testament to what can happen when you don't give up. But kind of following in that footsteps, that I just knew that I would always be there for my boys, through the ups, the downs, the celebrations, and the failures. And so I'm super proud of the fact that I said it was important and that I followed up on it. And then if I'm being real transparent, Eldra, that pandemic for me, it got to be dark. And there was a place where, I felt, broken, just because there's a lot of things that were happening, personally, professionally, that didn't align to my truth, that didn't align to me being the best version of myself. And it hurt me on like a soulful level, not even just like a physical or mental level. And so the fact that I'm sitting in front of you now and we're having this conversation is a testament to two incredible things in my life, of which I'm super proud of and grateful for. Number one, I believe that the reason I'm happier now is because I am living according to the plan that was created for me, that I don't always have insight as to all the details of the plan, but I've let go of the fact that I have to control it, and that I know that I am going to be moving in the right direction. And it feels good. It feels real good. Secondly, I'm here because when I was broken, my wife sheltered me. She literally put her body on me one time, and she was hugging me, and we were both crying. And I just felt like um, that was exactly what I needed at that moment, to begin to rebuild myself, to be the person I knew that I could be, even though I was in such a dark place.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and modeling, for our listeners what vulnerability looks like and can be. And when I get to the other side of a vulnerable moment, I'm still alive.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing horrible has happened.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being open. And I'm gonna ask you to see 6-year-old Maurice in your mind's eye. And having been through the things that you've been through and seen the things that you've seen, I'm going to ask you to pick him up and give him a piece of wisdom, give him a piece of advice to carry with him on his journey. What is that? What is that piece that you would pass to 6-year-old Maurice?
That as a human being, your value, your worth, is not determined by your actions or choices. As a youngster, you're going to make some really bad choices, but many of which stem from something that was beyond your control. But if possible, try to stay grounded in the fact that something inside of you lives that's just waiting to be born, if the right environment is around you that will help you to see it. And if you're patient and you look for the signs, you will find that person I'm talking about.
Yeah. Do you live by that more often than not today?
100%, because I'm still that little boy, Eldra. We all are. My age is old, my hair's falling out, my body's falling apart. But, who at the core, who I am is still a child. It's still a child that's this needing of love and belonging and recognition and everything else that kids need as adults. We still need those things. And so, yeah, I feel like I connected to source, and I'm in a very good place. Not to say that, hey, I'm hanging a mission accomplished banner behind me, because who knows what tomorrow brings. But when you've been to the depths, as a couple of many times as I have, and somehow been able to climb my way back out, at least I have that internal like example that you've made it through tough times and you'll continue to make it through tough times. But in the meantime, enjoy this beauty,
Yeah.
enjoy this light, because you deserve it. Eldra, you deserve it. And everybody listening to the podcast deserves it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I'll wrap with asking you if there's anything that we have not touched on today that you would like our listeners to hear, know, understand, investigate, look into, anything.
Yeah, I think just to close, a couple of things that come to mind is that for me, it's been really helpful to connect to people that I believe in and that serve as a mentor or a hero, personal hero. And so I did some thought around this when I was coming in. Like, I really think it's important to share that the wisdom that comes from connecting to people who are kind of farther along the path that you're on, right? And I'm not talking about the financial path. I'm not talking about the career path. I'm talking about life path, the universal path. And so first person you introduced me to, his name is Joe Sergensen. He does the work of Boys to Men mentoring down in San Diego. It is absolutely phenomenal to engage with that man in a conversation because he has also gone through some struggles, and yet he came out the other side just trying to be a true agent of change for the boys in need of most. Number two, Blinky Rodriguez, who now runs Champions in Service, used to be community schools in the San Fernando Valley near LA. That man, I get off the phone with him, and like you were talking about earlier about kind of connecting to church when you were younger, like I don't get off the phone with Blinky without feeling like, okay, it's almost like a cleanse that he kind of just had rebooted me in such a way that's going to be best aligned for my being my best self for that day as it pertains to the plan that's put in place for me. And believe it or not, and I got no reason to bullshit you on this, Eldra, that you are one of those men. And from the first time I heard you talk on the TED Talk and to the movie that I saw afterwards and sitting in front of you, you are a man who is authentic. You're a man who cares. You walk the walk. But I think just as importantly, you come with that intellectual humility that you got a lot to share, but you got something to learn as well. And I just feel like that resonates with me at the core. And so I just want you to know that, by no means is the list exhaustive, and, whether or not you're one of my heroes or not is not a huge deal, but it did mean something to me to share that with you today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that. And what I'll say, because I'm learning to receive, is thank you, sir.
There we go.
It's been an honor and a pleasure to sit with you, Maurice. I always walk away feeling like I've been fed spiritually, as well as mentally and emotionally. And I hope that our listeners get that same feeling and walk away with the same feeling and take something away from this, something to chew on and wrestle with inside of their spirit. So thank you for coming and sitting a spell with us today.
Hey, I appreciate it. And if there's a single listener that wants to further talk about anything we discussed, share my email address. We'll set this thing up because clearly I have a lot to say on the subject, but I also want to know what others had to say on the subject so that maybe we can actually make a difference in this. And it's not just something that we identify the problem, but we sit back and look at it as opposed to actually doing something about the problem.
Yeah. So where can our listeners find you? Go ahead and give that email out and anywhere else they may be able to find you. And we'll drop it all in the description with the episode.
Sure. I'm not fancy or anything. A simple email is all I got for you. It's regaladomaurice@gmail.com. So my last name, my first name @gmail.com. And this is not an obligatory statement. I welcome anybody who wants to have a further conversation on anything we discussed.
There it is, folks. There it is. Check him out. Do a little bit of learning and do a little bit of educating. This man is open to learning. Thank you, Maurice, for showing up how you show up and being who you are in the world. We need more like you.
Thank you, Eldra.